Have you guys heard? A new Star Wars trilogy was announced! Let the fanboys rejoice! Yeah, exactly. I'm not seeing any fan service for this new Simon Kinberg Star Wars trilogy. Right, but here's the funny part. This new trilogy wasn't officially announced. It was a leak that was first reported by Deadline Hollywood. Oh, remember the rumors like a week ago about the Rey movie being the start of Star Wars Episodes 10, 11, and 12? Yeah, no. This new Simon Kinberg trilogy was first rumored to be Star Wars Episodes 10, 11, and 12. Then there was an about face within a couple of days basically saying that this was going to be the start of a new saga and not a continuation of the Skywalker saga Episodes 1 through 9. And I know that at this point I sound very jaded about this news, but there are multiple reasons why I am very jaded about this recent Star Wars news. In my opinion, Lucasfilm is just throwing shit against the wall and just seeing what sticks. If you believe that I'm sounding too negative, let's go through some of the biggest announced and then later quietly canceled or delayed indefinitely, quote unquote, Star Wars movies that have been announced since 2017. Let's talk about the first canceled project, and that was Rian Johnson's Star Wars Trilogy. Yeah, kids, remember when Rian Johnson was going to helm a brand new Star Wars trilogy? And then he went on and made Knives Out with Daniel Craig. And then Knives Out was made on a production budget of about $40 million, but then grossed somewhere roughly around $300 million worldwide. Yeah, no, but after the success of Knives Out, Lucasfilm and everyone in the press was still coming out and basically waving their arms around and screaming, no. Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy is still happening. It's still happening. It's still happening. And then you heard a lot about it, obviously after the success of Knives Out. You heard a lot about it going into 2020. But over the last few years, you don't really hear about Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy anymore, unless if someone, asks the inevitable question at like a Star Wars celebration or somewhere around that. It only gets addressed maybe like once a year or once every other year. It's been 7 goddamn years at this point, almost 8 goddamn years since Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy was announced. At this point, there's an old adage. It's either shit or get off the pot. Okay, you can keep up the charade that it's happening, but if you're only addressing it every year or every other year, it's pretty safe to say that it's dead in the water. And the example that we can use is Beetlejuice. I know that there are reports that Tim Burton has wanted to do the Beetlejuice sequel since the 90s, but the difference between back then and today is that you didn't hear about the Beetlejuice sequel like almost every week or almost every year throughout the 90s. It's like, yeah, it's just Tim Burton wants to do a Beetlejuice sequel, but then it didn't happen for almost 30 years. And you didn't really hear about it until like a few years before it started. So again, with the Rian Johnson Star Wars trilogy, there has been so much news and so much promise that it's happening. But now it's been almost 8 years, and there still isn't a movie out. So what's the point of getting excited for Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy at this point? At this point, if Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy is still happening, I'll believe it when I see it. Let's go to the second canceled Star Wars project, and that was Benioff and Weiss's Star Wars trilogy, the guys behind Game of Thrones. Now, the cancellation behind that trilogy is actually much easier to explain. Is that obviously Season 8 of Game of Thrones came out and disappointed everyone under the sun. And I don't remember where they were. They were at some Comic-Con in Texas. It was either San Antonio or Houston. I could be wrong. I could even be wrong about the damn state. But anyway, they were at some Comic-Con where they basically admitted that when they were the showrunners on Game of Thrones, they had no idea what the hell they were doing. They were just flying by the seat of their pants and hoping for the best. And once that came out and blew up all around the internet, it then shifted to where it's like, wait a minute, these guys, Benioff and Weiss, just came out and admitted that they had no idea what they were doing on Game of Thrones. They were basically just winging it, and now they're going to helm a new Star Wars trilogy. All of a sudden, the news behind the Benioff and Weiss Star Wars trilogy, after their announcement that on Game of Thrones that they were just winging it and flying by the seat of their pants, after that news broke on the internet, you never heard anything about the Game of Thrones Star Wars trilogy after that, and rightfully so. And the third canceled Star Wars project that I want to touch on is Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron, which in my opinion was the most interesting of the bunch because it's good because it was based on the video game, but you're going to follow a squadron of X-Wing fighters. The one project that had the most promise, and then Wonder Woman 1984 came out, and then all of a sudden, the Rogue Squadron movie got delayed, and then it got delayed again, and then the Rogue Squadron movie just got delayed indefinitely after the release of Wonder Woman 1984. Now, I know a lot of people didn't like Wonder Woman 1984, but it's rather suspicious that movie came out, the audience rejected it, and then all of a sudden Lucasfilm got cold feet and decided, yeah, no, we're not doing the Rogue Squadron movie anymore. No. We made a mistake with hiring Patty Jenkins. This reminds me, and there's another canceled Star Wars project I didn't touch on because it wasn't technically canceled, was the Boba Fett movie that was announced in 2016. That was later turned into the Book of Boba Fett on Disney Plus. That's why I didn't dedicate one of my canceled Star Wars projects. That's the reason I haven't talked about it yet. But anyway, if you remember, the Boba Fett movie that was announced in 2016 was originally going to be directed by Josh Trank, the director of Chronicle and the ill-fated Fant Four Stick. And that movie was still in production, and then what happened to it? Oh yeah, before the premiere of Fant Four Stick, Josh Trank went on Twitter and slammed his own movie by saying something to the effect of that he had a much better version of Fant Four Stick before Fox touched it and completely ruined it, blah, 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 blah. This was all a few days before the movie came out. And then all of a sudden, you heard nothing about the Boba Fett movie. You heard nothing about Josh Trank being fired. It was just assumed because you never heard about the Boba Fett movie. But still, Josh Trank makes Fant Four Stick, slams it on Twitter. You know, Josh Trank makes Fant Four Stick gets rejected. All of a sudden, Lucasfilm gets cold feet, doesn't make the Boba Fett movie, instead transforms it into a streaming show. But they weren't thinking about doing a streaming show back in 2016 because it was announced as a movie. They just repurposed it years later. With Rogue Squadron, I don't think it's ever going to get repurposed. But again, with Rogue Squadron, Patty Jenkins releases Wonder Woman 1984. The audience rejects it. All of a sudden, Lucasfilm gets cold feet and just decides to delay Rogue Squadron indefinitely. And I know I've dragged this video on longer than I probably needed to, so I'll end it off with this. In my opinion, Star Wars is done theatrically. In fact, there have been so many Star Wars movies that have been announced and then subsequently canceled or quote-unquote delayed indefinitely that the fans are now in the mindset of, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. How's that Rey movie coming along? Oh, yeah, it lost its latest screenwriter, Stephen Knight. If we're being honest, even the Rey movie is probably not going to happen. All of the news surrounding the Rey movie reminds me of the Rian Johnson trilogy being reported in the press. There were these reports that would come out to suggest that it was still happening. It's okay, guys, it's still happening. And yet, after 7 years, almost 8 years, there is still no Rian Johnson trilogy. In my opinion, we will continue to hear about the Rey movie going into 2025 and up until the Mandalorian and Grogu movie releases in theaters in 2026. after The Mandalorian and Grogu's release, the Rey movie won't be canceled publicly. It will just stop being talked about altogether. If you can't tell from the tone of this video, I am very jaded when it comes to any announced Star Wars movie or show, because it just isn't worth the energy to get excited for something only to have it delayed indefinitely or quietly canceled, whichever term you prefer. The last Star Wars movie that I was excited for was Rogue Squadron, and look what happened to that movie relatively quickly after Wonder Woman 1984 came out. It wasn't canceled, but it was quote-unquote delayed indefinitely. Fool me once, Lucasfilm, shame on you. Fool me twice, then shame on me.